Welcome everyone to World Affairs Fridays. This is a weekly program offered by the Peoria Area World Affairs Council and Bradley University that features a wide variety of dignitaries, experts, and academics who discuss global issues and how they affect us here in Central Illinois. This program will be recorded, so you are welcome to turn off your camera if you wish. Our guests will answer questions from participants, and so you are invited to submit your questions in the chat. It is my honor today to introduce our distinguished guest. Ambassador Amit Kumar is the Consul General of the Consulate of India in Chicago. Prior to coming to Chicago, he was the Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. with the rank of Ambassador. Ambassador Kumar is a career diplomat who joined the Foreign Service of India in 1995. He has wide-ranging experience, including dealing with both bilateral and multilateral work in political, strategic, and economic spheres. His recent assignments include stints as Joint Secretary for Development Partnership Administration and as Joint Secretary for Human Resources Management in the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi. He was also Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of India in Tokyo, and he has previously served as Undersecretary in China and Director in the Foreign Secretary's Office in New Delhi. His overseas assignments include stints in a number of key capitals as Third Secretary in the Embassy of India in Beijing, First Secretary dealing with political work in the Embassy of India in Berlin, First Secretary Counselor dealing with political, information, First Secretary Counselor dealing with political information, cultural, and education work at the Embassy of India in Ankara, Counselor and Head of the Economic Commercial Wing in the Embassy of India in Beijing, and Consular Minister dealing with the Third Committee and UN Security Council matters in the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations in New York. Ambassador Kumar holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the India Institute of Technology and Kanpur, and he is married to Mrs. Surabhi Kumar, and they have 2 children. Ambassador Kumar, welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Vek, for that kind introduction. It is a pleasure to interact with you all today. I thank the World Affairs Council in Peoria for bringing us together through this virtual platform. I will speak today about the fascinating partnership between India and the United States, the world's largest and oldest democracies, the 2 countries which are also among the world's largest economies and markets, and which are also societies that respect innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship. Many commentators and political leaders have spoken of the importance of our relationship as one of the key partnerships for the 21st century. The 2 countries enjoy wide-ranging cooperation, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that our cooperation today encompasses almost every facet of human life. In India, you have a partner whom you can count on, and most importantly, a player whose scale, strength, and success in the coming days would be an important contribution for the global well-being. So as we speak about the India-US relations and our priorities in the coming year, I will also touch upon the India story as to what we are trying to do back home and achieve as we move beyond the pandemic. We view the United States as an important partner in our quest to transform our economy and in realizing our development aspirations. At the same time, India's growth and development are not just in India's interest alone. It is in the interest of the world. Last year has been an exceptionally tough year in many ways, almost like a black swan event. The pandemic brought global economic activity to a halt. No country or region was immune from its impact. Direct consequence of the increasingly globalized world that we live in. The pandemic led to high human and economic costs. It disrupted global supply chains, affected trade, and sharply contracted the economy. Yet we also saw several inspiring stories of the indomitable human spirit. Positive news about successful vaccines and the ongoing vaccination drive has given us cause for optimism, for renewal, for growth and recovery. If we look at India-US relations, the trajectory of our relations have consistently moved forward over the past 2 decades. The India-US relations enjoy deep bipartisan support in this country. The same is true of India, where these relations enjoy cross-party support. In fact, last month, the new US Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, characterized the India-US relationship as a bipartisan success. President Biden's administration took over last month. Moving forward, I believe there will be 5 key baskets where we can expect closer cooperation between India and the United States. First, given the immediate background of the pandemic, we will continue seeing more intensive cooperation in healthcare, pharma, and COVID-19 management, including affordable vaccine development and delivery. A second category would relate to digital cooperation, especially in information and communication technology, digital space, etc. A third basket would be renewable energy, including solar energy and more broadly initiatives at promoting sustainable, greener economic growth, which will also allow us to combat climate change. A fourth category of issues would be higher education, science, technology, and innovation partnership. And fifth would be our traditional cooperation in strategic and defense areas, including in the Indo-Pacific, that will continue. Let me begin with the pandemic cooperation. The issue of COVID-19 management and control is an issue of critical importance for India, the US, and the world. The new US administration has also made this a priority, as President Biden indicated this in his first executive orders and public remarks. As you might know, India is the largest producer of vaccines and is often dubbed as the pharmacy of the world. We supply over 60% of vaccines for children globally. We meet around 40% of generic medicines demand in the United States, reducing the healthcare expenditure here by $80 to $90 billion annually. The Indian pharma industry has the necessary skill, capability, and speed in vaccine manufacturing and delivery systems that will be key to managing the COVID-19 globally, particularly in the developing world. The Bill Gates Foundation and Gavi Alliance have teamed up with vaccine manufacturers in India, and so have WHO and UNICEF. In all, the commitment is to provide 1.1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines over the next several months to Africa and other developing countries at affordable rates. India and United States have a long-standing partnership in area of health and scientific research and have closely collaborated in combating diseases such as tuberculosis, cancer, HIV, and eye diseases. The India-US Vaccine Action Program, which is anchored by the National Institute of Health, the Indian Department of Biotechnology, and the Indian Council for Medical Research, have collaborated for over 3 decades. Therefore, it was not surprising to see that with the outbreak of COVID-19, from the very beginning, scientists on both sides, including the Center for Disease Control and the Indian Council for Medical Research and several other scientific organizations, were in close contact. They shared information and exchanged notes on the therapeutic, diagnostic, and transmission aspects of COVID-19. In fact, the last meeting of the India-US Science and Technology Forum awarded grants to a dozen binational teams of researchers to study different aspects of COVID-19. Back home in India, the government had launched a scheme called the Ayushman Bharat scheme in 2018, which provides medical coverage to over 500 million Indians from low-income groups. It is an innovative public-private partnership, and more than 14,000 hospitals, both public and private, have been impaneled under this scheme. Over 100 million people have been issued e-cards for the purpose. The objective is to ensure a cashless transaction system for patients funded by government at agreed rates with the hospitals. This, along with the last mile strengthening of health infrastructure and potential of telemedical consultations, will transform and significantly improve healthcare in India. It goes without saying that this also opens up enormous opportunities for US companies. There is much that India and US can do together in this sector, such as pharmaceuticals, basic research, vaccines, diagnostics, medical devices, hospital administration, and so on. As I mentioned, green energy and climate change will be another important area for cooperation. Insofar as these challenges are concerned, we recognize that climate change cannot be fought in silos. It requires an integrated, comprehensive, and holistic approach. We are therefore taking practical steps across all areas, including energy, industry, transport, agriculture, and production of green spaces in our whole of society journey to combat climate change and to become a leader in climate ambition. Prime Minister Modi, just like President Biden, shares a personal passion and commitment towards climate change and clean energy. 5 years after the Paris Agreement, India is among the very few countries that are not only meeting the green targets but also aspiring to set more ambitious climate goals. At the recent Climate Adaptation Summit last month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi articulated India's approach. He said that we must set our sights even higher, even as we do not lose sight of the past. He added that India would not only achieve its Paris Agreement targets, but would exceed them. We have achieved many milestones in clean energy, including being among the top 10 countries in the Climate Change Performance Index and undertaking one of the world's largest renewable energy expansion programs. More than a third of energy generation in India is currently from renewable sources. Access to clean energy technologies and financing would be important areas of collaboration between our two countries. Let me also refer to a few statistics to understand the scale of progress and effort underway in India. We initially committed to generating 175 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2022. We now expect to cross 220 gigawatts in the next 2 years. We have even set a more ambitious target of 450 gigawatts by 2030. We are also working to ensure that 40% of electric power in India is from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. This clean energy push goes hand in hand with the effort to reduce emissions intensity of our economy by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels by 2030. The Ujala scheme, which is a national drive to use LED bulbs instead of the normal incandescent bulbs, is reducing CO2 emissions by 38.5 million tons every year. Under the Ujala scheme, over 80 million households have been provided access to clean cooking gas in one of the largest clean energy initiatives in the world. This has also led to other benefits such as better health conditions for women and freeing up their time for other tasks. Additional forest cover is growing in India. More trees are being planted and degraded land is being reclaimed to create a carbon sink that can absorb 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 annually. India is also working to create a greener transport network to address pollution from the transport sector, particularly in our big cities. India is investing in next generation mass transit systems, green highways and waterways. A national electric mobility plan is creating an e-mobility ecosystem with the aim to have over 30% of all vehicles on India's roads to be electric by 2030. Our effort is to be a responsible global citizen in the climate space. We are not only going beyond our Paris commitments, we are also adopting innovative instruments to advance international cooperation in climate change. We have created international organizations like the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure that are working on creating global low carbon pathways. More than 80 countries have joined the International Solar Alliance, making it one of the fastest growing international bodies. We believe that a combination of national action and international cooperation makes India unique amongst developing countries and placing it on a path to realize our ambitions on climate change. India and the United States have been discussing many of these areas through institutional dialogue mechanisms. There is a ministerial level strategic energy dialogue, which has 4 working groups which focus on power and energy efficiency, oil and gas, renewable energy, and sustainable growth. We are also working towards increasing share of liquefied natural gas in our energy mix. The 2 countries are also working to develop battery technology for better storage of energy. The US International Development Finance Corporation has announced US $600 billion financing facility for renewable energy projects in India. Therefore, as you can all see, climate change will be a critical area of cooperation. India has been in the forefront. Our endeavor is to strike a balance between economic development imperatives for our own people and the growth of and the protection of the environment. We have committed to a green path for our growth. Turning to the strategic side, I think it's fair to say that there is much more increased frequency of consultations among senior cabinet members and senior officials over the past 20 years. Every president from the US and every prime minister from India has visited each other's country during this period. The defense and strategic partnership is a critical component of our relationship. In addition to the regular consultations that we have between the foreign offices, there's also a 2+2 dialogue at ministerial level that brings together foreign and defense ministries. There's a separate defense policy group that provides a platform for comprehensive review of our defense dialogues and mechanisms. In recent years, we have seen the Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, the Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, Industrial Security Annex, and the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement concluded between the two countries. LAMOA, COMCASA, BICA, and all these foundational agreements will enhance military coordination as well as scope for interoperability. We have consistently crafted new milestones and moved forward. Our defense trade now stands at $21 billion in a short span, and we are collaborating in new domains like joint R&D and innovation. In fact, there is an initiative called Defense Trade and Technology Initiative that has been launched during President Obama's time and is working fairly well. The objective is to bring sustained leadership focus to the bilateral defense trade relationship and create opportunities for co-production and co-development of defense equipment and platforms. India has been designated a major defense partner by the US and accorded the Strategic Trade Authorization 1 status by the US Department of Commerce. Our bilateral military exercises and defense exchanges are an important part of deepening military-to-military cooperation. There are a number of established service-to-service exercises, including tri-services exercise. Over the years, these exercises have grown both in their scale and scope. As I mentioned, over the past few years, we have procured several defense platforms from the United States. Our maritime surveillance capability has increased with the acquisition of P-8I aircraft from the United States. We have transport aircrafts as well as helicopters from the US. And these have helped us in our work on border areas as well as in rendering humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to our partner countries in the region. We continue to work closely to ensure a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. The two countries enjoy a robust counterterrorism cooperation and look forward to further reducing this transnational threat. There are ongoing consultations on issues such as maritime security, anti-piracy efforts, improving connectivity in the region, strengthening capacity for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Moving to trade and economy, the economic and commercial linkages are an important component of our partnership. The quantum of bilateral trade in goods and services was nearly 150 billion US dollars in 2019, which translates into a compound annual growth rate of over 11% since 2000. There has admittedly been a slowdown in our bilateral trade in 2020 due to the pandemic. Nonetheless, recent trade figures indicate that the trade volume for 2020 was close to 2018 figures. Therefore, I think we are going to see a much sharper increase in our trade growth this year. And I also believe that all underlying factors that had propelled growth of trade in recent years continue to be relevant, and in fact we should focus on achieving much higher trade growth. There are several studies which suggest that we can achieve a trade volume of $250 billion in the next 5 to 7 years, and that should be our primary objective. Our trade relationship has been carried forward by rapid growth in several sectors such as energy, defense, manufacturing, heavy engineering, and information technology. I will refer to a couple of important developments. Our energy trade rose from zero and stands cumulatively at over US $20 billion in the last 4 years. The export of shale gas and LNG from the US to India is important for our energy security. The other important area would be the civil aviation sector. Before Boeing got bogged down with its problems with 737 MAX aircraft and the subsequent slowdown in global air travel, Indian airline companies had placed orders comprising several hundred aircrafts from Boeing worth over $30 billion. So moving forward, this will be an important new area of trade. We have seen reports about Boeing getting regulatory approvals for again flying Boeing 737 MAX. And therefore, in the coming years, we should see this trade growing up. Many civil aviation experts believe that 10 years from now, the pause seen in air travel growth in India due to the pandemic would appear to be a blip. Our investment flows have truly become two-way. The US foreign direct investment in India is over $40 billion. Similarly, Indian companies have invested close to $22 billion in the US economy, adding value, innovation, and up to 125,000 jobs here. In India, during pandemic, Government of India took a number of proactive steps and several economic welfare measures to manage the COVID situation and mitigate the impact of the pandemic. But government also further liberalized the economy and reformed several sectors, including taxation, labor, agriculture, and so on. It advanced social security, healthcare provisioning, and financial inclusion. I think all this has laid the groundwork for sustained broad-based economic recovery in India, and recent economic indicators attest to several green shoots showing a turnaround in the economy. One priority has been to strengthen India's manufacturing sector and to integrate it more actively with the global supply chains. The core objective of the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission is to build greater national capacities so that we can make a stronger contribution globally. The government has also made a concerted effort to promote a favorable startup ecosystem in India. There is now a nodal officer in the federal government who has been tasked with this responsibility. Our experience has been positive. There were 11 unicorns in India in 2020. There are 40 to 50 promising startups which have the potential to be unicorns in the next 2 to 3 years. These are all very exciting developments, and they will be drivers for creating more growth and employment in India. As I earlier mentioned, we also view the higher education sector and knowledge-based partnerships to be another important component of our relationship. The Government of India had unveiled a new national education policy last year, a major policy overhaul taken after 34 years. In brief, the vision behind the new national education policy is to fundamentally transform the way our universities have functioned so far. So, among its objectives is to expand the role of the university to serve as a hub or fulcrum for the wider community, to make its curriculum more flexible and in tune with the latest developments in industry and beyond, to introduce a culture of multidisciplinary approach, moving away from the silo-based approaches, incentivizing research and strengthening the interface between the academics and industry. In this regard, the experience of US universities is very pertinent. As we all know, they have been also in the forefront of cutting-edge research in the US in several areas. I think we have much to learn and benefit from that experience and to be adapted to the Indian circumstances. I'll take a minute to mention some of the historical linkages between universities in India and the US. To give an example, the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur, my alma mater, was established with cooperation from a consortium of 10 leading US universities led by MIT in 1960s. The University of Urbana-Champaign in Illinois was instrumental in setting up 6 agricultural colleges in India in the 1950s and 60s, which later joined hands to form two agricultural universities in Uttarakhand and Madhya Pradesh regions of provinces of India. The new national education policy allows for deeper collaboration between universities on both sides, and thereby allowing to move beyond the ongoing exchange of students and faculty. Moving forward, it opens up possibilities for curriculum development, joint degree programs between US and Indian universities, joint research, and eventually leading to possibility of opening of branch campuses of US universities in India. It might surprise you to learn that today there is only one university, the University of Washington in St. Louis, which offers a joint degree program, a joint degree master's program with the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai. Surely we can have more of such cooperation. I think since we are living in COVID times, allow me to make a few broad observations with regard to the pandemic. At the outset of the pandemic, we saw economic activity coming to a halt globally, severely disrupting global supply chains. This has led to reassessment of global supply chains, particularly in critical areas, for example, medical supply, pharmaceuticals, personal protective equipment, or critical technology. There is thus an opportunity for India to step up its efforts in this direction and become a more active player in global supply chains. The pandemic also led to new forms of cooperation, almost unheard of, in the race to develop the vaccine. And I do hope that this will lead to new models of drug development, leading to reduced costs and more affordable medicines in the future. The pandemic also fast-tracked adaptation of technology in a few sectors, particularly in the field of healthcare and education. We have seen in India digital connectivity being used effectively for medical consultations and diagnostics. This is of particular interest to us given our large population, and it will help expand healthcare and education to rural areas, throwing up new opportunities for both Indian and foreign companies. And lastly, I think the pandemic will fundamentally transform how we live, how we work, how we entertain ourselves. There would be a few sectors and industries where working from home might become the norm. The era of big business conference might be over, and this would obviously impact on business travel as companies discover more affordable ways to conduct business. As you all know, I am based in Chicago, and I cover 9 states in the US Midwest, these being Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Michigan, North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin. So let me say a few words on why I believe the US Midwest is such an important region for us. The US Midwest accounts for 21% of US population and 20% of GDP. We all know of its key role in economic growth of the United States in post-World War II era. We also saw how as the US economy transitioned from a manufacturing-led economy to a service-led economy, and eventually to a knowledge-based economy growing in prominence, the region was left behind. However, I think what is remarkable today is how the Midwest has reinvented itself and is trying to reposition itself as a hub for advanced and smart manufacturing, building upon its traditional strengths and marrying technology and innovation. And we are seeing this in areas like electronic mobility, autonomous vehicles, and drones. It is also emerging as a hub for exciting startups in pharmaceuticals, biohealth, and healthcare sectors. Secondly, the region has utilized locational advantages and available resources to develop expertise in areas such as renewable energy, particularly wind energy, and niche technologies, such as advanced clean technologies or IT-enabled services in the agricultural sector. And in this transition, the region has been held by an excellent higher education system with several top-ranked universities and cutting-edge research facilities. India's total trade with the US Midwest amounts to around $12 billion annually, but I believe that there is immense synergy and potential for collaboration between the US Midwest states and India in the areas that I have outlined earlier. The economic revival in the Midwest, coupled with a slower cost of living, makes an attractive destination for Indian companies which are seeking new growth areas. There are also about 600,000 Indian Americans in the region. And it's not surprising to know that the size of the Indian community in the Midwest grew most rapidly when compared to other regions in the US. For us, I think this experience of the region of navigating the transition from a purely manufacturing-led economy to a knowledge-based economy offers lesson by way of experience sharing as advent of technology reshapes the employment landscape and underlines the need for new education, training, and skills. The sustainable development targets and challenges of climate change will also require a new paradigm of building resilient economies and services, which also sort of integrate and draw upon local communities and local resources. With those words, I'll conclude my remarks, and I look forward to taking questions and interacting with you all.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. That was really a very broad coverage of a lot of topics. And I think that there are a few in the chat, and there are a few that were sent to me earlier. Would you start off with perhaps a discussion of what you think, what India thinks, according to you, what do you think should be the priorities of the Biden administration toward India?
So I think what I outlined in my remarks, we have set out priorities in, say, health cooperation, for example, or climate change related issues, greener economic models. And these are very broad areas, of course, expanding economic and commercial relations. And these are areas which we see as priority. And of course, we can't speak for the Biden administration, but I'm certain that, and on issues such as knowledge partnership, innovation, technology, I think all these areas would be areas where we would find convergence with the Biden administration in terms of advancing a relation.
Okay.
And not to say, of course, also the strategic issues, defense relationship, Indo-Pacific. And I think part of the reason is, as you know, in our field of work, when the primary responsibilities of the consulates are little different, and in terms of how I mentioned about our priorities, perhaps some of you might wonder as to why I talked about a strategic cooperation a little later. I can just assure you that from the consulate's viewpoint, our focus is primarily on commercial partnership, knowledge-based partnerships, higher education, and so on. And so that was the sole reason as to why it came up. But this is not to suggest in any way that we are not looking at those issues in equal important measure.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So one of the questions when you were speaking about vaccines earlier, Connie asked, is India producing 60% of the COVID vaccines? Is that what you said? I didn't.
So what? Yeah. So what I said that the global vaccine demand, we do meet 60% of that requirement, and these are distributed through World Health Organization networks. So we have a partnership with the World Health.
Very good. Bob is asking, is India expanding or reducing the volume of coal produced by, or electricity produced by coal?
So we are certainly not expanding use of coal, but if you look at the history of electricity development in India, it has primarily been either big hydropower projects in India or coal-based thermal power projects. But currently, we have seen a substantial expansion of renewable energy in India. Is primarily solar, to a lesser degree wind energy. But we are moving ahead. We are increasing share of LNG and shale gas and other components to our energy mix. We are looking at having electric vehicles. So we have set targets in different areas, and so we are And when you look at the coal sector, our effort has been to also look at cleaner coal technologies. And in fact, we have been in talks with US, with Germany, countries which have done a lot of advanced technical work in this area. So one of the working groups under a strategic energy dialogue with the US is focused on power efficiency. So, and within that subset, we are also talking about clean coal technologies.
Okay.
Moving forward, 40% of electricity production through renewable energy.
Does that include greater thorium nuclear reactors?
So I do hope. So as you might know, that there is this there is talk of particle accelerator based nuclear power plants, and this type of technology might be maybe 15 years away now from commercialization. In fact, the Fermi Lab, the national laboratory with the Chicago University, is doing a lot of research in that area. In fact, I think Congressman Bill Foster from Illinois is a nuclear physicist, and he was mentioning to me that we should really be focused on this as an energy source, because a particle accelerator-based nuclear reactor will never have a danger of a nuclear meltdown. Of course, you have to, I think, and the nuclear waste on a thorium-based power plant is much less compared to uranium-based power plant. So that is something that should be pursued. We should not lose sight of that technology in our pursuit for renewable energy.
Yeah, thank you. Marge and I are very interested always in thorium reactors and solar and renewable energy. So I'm glad to hear that India is pursuing a full range of renewable energy sources. Charles asks, what's the regional and global reach of the Indian Navy?
It's an interesting question, but we have, of course, a fairly sizable Navy, but in terms of operations, we conduct, of course, exercises with all important partners around the globe, but we certainly have operations in South of Africa, around the Gulf of Aden, and South China, not South, in Southeast Asia. So that would be the broad footprint. I would not characterize it as global per se, but certainly a sizable regional presence.
That's good. And then a couple of questions, again, perhaps outside the scope of what the consulate does, but in relation to other Indian military activities, somebody asked about the conflict along the Indian-Chinese border. I understand there's an agreement that they cannot be armed, neither side can be armed, yet apparently they can do quite a bit of damage with sticks and clubs.
No, I think, oh, sorry, I don't know if I've interrupted you. Shall I answer this question, or you had something
go ahead.
to add? No. So I think what has happened last year in June, when the conflict broke out in eastern Ladakh, on the eastern side of the border, is quite unprecedented. So we have a fairly long border with China, and parts of it are not delineated. But over the years, beginning in 1993, then 96, 2003, 2005, we had a series of protocols and agreements on how to deal with the border issue. And it basically talked of, first of all, you are right, we are not supposed to be armed there. Both sides routinely patrol up to areas which they claim on the border. But this is without prejudice to the eventual determination of the final border. There was also agreement that there will be no massing of troops on either side of the border where it's not delineated. And I think all those agreements have been appended. And our position has, by the Chinese side, and then we had to take some countermeasures in August. Our discussions are continuing. But to briefly sort of summarize the position is that we continue to stress that the agreements that had worked well for 40 years should be adhered to in their entirety, in letter and in spirit. So that is the first attempt, and there should not be any attempt to unilaterally change the status quo there at the border. And of course, Chinese have not responded as yet to these demands. So both sides continue to maintain troops. I, of course, have no idea as to how this will proceed further in coming days. But peace and tranquility on our border areas was a prerequisite on advancement of our relations in so many areas over the past 3 decades. So inevitably, if this major understanding will be breached, it will have impact on our bilateral relations. So, but again, this is a situation which is in a bit of flux right now. I don't want to say any more, but to say that both the Foreign Office and the military leadership at senior levels continue to be engaged with China on this.
Okay. How does the relationship between India and China affect? How deep is the relationship? Do you have extensive trade with them, for example?
Yes.
And does that relationship impact the U.S.-India relationship?
If you look at the India and China relationship from say trade perspective, we have a fairly sizable trade with China. Of course, we have also seen that while they push for market access in India, they are not so open when it comes to access for Indian products. And this is an experience which is not sort of confined to India. Many countries face these challenges with China. So, of course, there is a bit of impact. Public perception in India has dramatically changed after the events of June last year on our borders. So there will be an impact. I think US is also trying to calibrate its relations with China. We have a new administration in place. President Biden, in his first foreign policy speech yesterday, alluded to challenges when it comes to China. But ultimately, I think what we are looking to when it comes to the challenge of China is again the whole issue of how international law, international norms are observed by China. Do we have a common set of norms that all of us can agree to? So I think that is the critical challenge in the coming years. Then of course the other issues relating to IPR, and I think we continue to grapple with that. We have had investments from China in the past, but I think there will be a slowdown in the coming years.
Okay. That sounds like India faces the same kinds of issues that the United States does when trying to navigate trade and economic issues with China. So another question from the chat, can you comment on any progress on equity and safety and justice for females in India?
Sorry, can I repeat the question?
She's asking about the status of women in India. Can you comment on progress on equity, safety, and justice for women in India?
I think, of course, we have seen incidents which should not happen in any country, including in India when it comes to safety or women's empowerment. But what I can outline is that in terms of government policy and approach, we have taken several initiatives, say, on improving access to education and health and sanitation for girl students in India. We have taken initiatives on gender equality, creating safer workplaces for women when it comes to employment. So I would say that this is a ongoing process, and the government has also tried to work with NGOs and civic society groups to push forward this.
Do you believe that improvements have been made?
I think, yes, improvements are being made.
Okay. I want to read a comment from another participant. He says, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this opportunity to understand your focus on Midwest companies and potential for collaboration. This is from Kieran, hopefully I'm not destroying his last name, Kadki, who has a PhD. He is from the Tata Cognitive Solutions, innovative technology platform helping industrial companies and healthcare providers with rapid supply chain and operation collaboration. So a local Indian company. So I missed a question about the farmers, and I apologize.
Yeah, so
asked and it has told me go back and ask my question.
no. I think the farmers issue is I think is an important issue. I think it has been in the news
yes.
For a few weeks, and I think it's important to put this entire farmers' protest in perspective. And since many of you probably had followed this issue closely, you will be surprised by the lack of information or absence of information as to what the farmers are protesting about.
Yes.
So I think so. Let me put this entire issue in a bit of context. For those who have followed India, would know that 1991 was a watershed event in our contemporary history. That was the year when we took our first deep structural economic reforms under international pressure. It was sort of under IMF pressure. But since then, I think the government of India has undertaken several reforms in several sectors, and this remains an unfinished business. But over the past 3 decades, agricultural sector was never touched. Now, back in 1991, we were a agricultural sort of in terms of a farm deficit country. I think we did not produce enough food for ourselves. Today, we are a farm surplus country. We export a few food items from India. So over the years, our agricultural productivity increased, agricultural production expanded, but with it also brought some problems. The farm productivity has now plateaued for several years. There has been a stagnation in the farmers' income, and the system that was put in place to deal with the situation as it existed 30 years ago is actually becoming a hindrance in growth of the agricultural sector. And that is why these reforms are so important for us. What do the reforms do? They essentially expand marketing options for farmers to sell their produce in India. Now, under the current system, a farmer from a particular district can only sell what is called the Agricultural Production Marketing Corporation in his district. He cannot even sell it to neighboring districts. So India has 29 estates and we have over 500 districts in India. So you can imagine the type of constraints it imposes on the farmer. And obviously in such a system, you cannot have a fair price discovery. And it is often the case that the middlemen sort of garner far more profits compared to the farmer who has produced the crops. There are two associated problems. So the law allows for the agricultural produce to be marketed nationwide to any registered trader or through e-commerce platforms. So that is what the law tries to do. But the government has also looked at other issues, how to increase investment in farm support services, how to increase investment in food processing industry. On both these scores, India does not do well at all. So our fresh farm produce wastage is close to 15%. It's a criminal wastage in my view. Our food processing of farm produce is close to 10%, much lower than any major economy. And these are places where you need to invite private investment. But to do that, you need to reform the underlying structure that has been in place. Now, coming to the farm protests, one would presume that farmers are protesting because they have certain concerns. And the government has held 11 rounds of negotiations with them. But it is not clear what the farmers are trying, because the government keeps telling them, you have these 3 laws, you have these clauses. Which clause is the one which is causing you problem? You air your concern, you detail your concern, and we'll be happy to discuss and try and find a solution to your concerns. And so while protests are fine, and these are, of course, part of our democratic tradition. But we also need to move beyond protests and try and understand what the protest is all about. And that is something we are frankly trying to figure out, because the farmers have not spelled out their concerns, uh, their specific concerns, and therefore it makes very difficult to move forward. And I think objective protest cannot be scaling back of reformist agenda of the government. That is not possible. And in a country like India, I think this is another important aspect that people should understand. In a country like India, we have almost like 40 to 45% of our population is directly or indirectly linked with agriculture.
Wow.
So that translates to almost 500 million people. So it doesn't. So if 500 million people were upset in India about a reform, then the government would be in a lot of problems. So this protest is actually driven by a much smaller segment of the farmers' community, drawn from 2-3 states of India, and perhaps they are being affected. Government has also offered to put these laws on hold for 18 months so that there is time to discuss these competing issues or whatever specific concerns the farmers have. And there is government has also set aside $13.7 billion to assist smaller farmers during this transition period, because we are conscious of the fact that when we move away from one type of system to another, there could be glitches, there could be bottlenecks before the new system takes hold. So I suppose that is those are different facets of this problem that we are dealing with. But the government has again signaled this commitment to engage in dialogue and resolve any specific concerns that the farmers have.
Yeah. Well, I think we in the United States can certainly understand protest confusion. So people aren't always sure what we're mad about, but we're just darn mad. Yeah. So the last two questions I'm going to roll together so that we can end this, almost on time as normal. But Lenora Fisher from the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, asks, how would you suggest getting the Greater Peoria region and other smaller, more rural regions of the United States, and your district covers us all practically, how would you get us on the Indian company's radar for business investment? What do you suggest would be the best way?
No, I think it's an interesting question, but this would I think we should look at Indian companies who are already present in the Midwest to see how they can strengthen the linkages. So I would suggest that maybe the Greater Peoria Economic Development Commission, or whatever the body is, get in touch with us, and we can discuss this a little separately. But I think that would be for me that would be the starting point, because we have to look at Indian companies which are present in the US already, because to gain attention of an Indian company who is trying to look at the US market for the first time may not be the best option.
And vice versa. I think there's a lot of possibility for US companies to invest in India and move to India. I'd like my husband to go to India, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, any company who is trying to look at India, you can just put them in touch with us.
Excellent. And the last question is, would you recommend any book or books that might give us a better understanding of the Indian culture, people, history? What do you think is a good resource that those in our council could use?
Oh, I think there are several good books which have come out on India, including one written by my foreign minister in recent days. But I think what I'll do is I will maybe send a list to you, and you can then circulate among your members, people who are on the call today.
Terrific. Marge, I'm apologizing because I can't find the name of the book. Do you want to unmute yourself and remind everybody of our book club in April?
Yes, I'm sorry. I facilitated the last book club, and there was only 2 of us that had read the book, so that was a little awkward. And I think part of it was because we hadn't had enough time. That's just so I think Destined for War is the next book. I'm not leading that, so it's by Graham Ellison, and I think it'll be in what, April?
It's in April. And I'm sorry, it's not necessarily related to this, so I apologize.
That's right. I know it hasn't. Destined for War by
right,
Graham.
It's about China, right? It's U.S. and China relations. So, all right.
By Graham Ellison.
So, did you have any closing remarks that you would like to make, Investor Kumar?
No closing remarks per se, but just to say that it was a pleasure interacting with you all, and I'll like to be in touch with, and we also, if you can share details about your activities, I'm sure some of my colleagues may be interested in those, and look forward to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, in fact, I would like to encourage the Jim Ryan and Jim Foley to explore greater partnerships with universities in India. For a while, it was a really big project for Bradley University to try to get a partner institution, and COVID happens and budgets are cut, and so things get on the back burner, but it might be a good time to get back into that mode and jump on the bandwagon early. So yes, we will definitely be in contact. So
Angela, you're preaching to the choir, so thanks for mentioning that.
And Jim Ryan is, and there you go. Very good, thank you. Yeah, Jim Ryan is a huge advocate for global education and in creating partnerships with universities, especially in India. So,
in fact, just a small comment I wanted to mention was we have actually over 40,000 Indian students in the US Midwest region. Purdue University in Indiana is I think by far the largest, has around 2,300 Indian students. But and we have around 200,000 Indian students in US universities across. So I think these most of them return to India, and I think they carry back ideas, their experiences, and I think this is all driving, I think, growth in areas like startups or social innovation in India, and the new generation of people, they are not looking at, like, they don't look at employment in the way I looked at it 25 years ago, and they're ready to jump on from one stream to other, and in fact, in some ways, are more socially engaged than we were 25 years. So that is a very, very positive thing that I see among the youth in India.
Yeah, terrific. And here as well, you know, I mean, those are going to be our innovators of tomorrow, you know, literally tomorrow, not in 10 years, but tomorrow. So both in your country and in ours. So forging some partnerships is going to benefit us both. So, well, thank you all for joining us for this dynamic discussion. Thank you, Investor Kumar, for your generosity with both your time and for taking all questions from everyone. We look forward to the opportunity perhaps to host you in person in the very near future when this pandemic ends.
Certainly.
And then
Thank you so much.
We can show off our region.
Thank you. Thank you.
So again, on behalf of Peoria Area World Affairs Council and Bradley University, thank you all for joining us. Next week, we're going to look at vaccine from development to deployment with a team of experts from Methodist College. If you are not yet a member, please join us at pawac.org, PAWAC.org.